Hi everyone, welcome to our presentation. Today we are going to be sharing with you what we learned about self-regulation skills. So the title of our project is Tantrum, Tears, and Talking Back, the importance of teaching self-regulation skills. We will now introduce ourselves as your presenters.
Hello everyone, my name is Cantú. I teach fourth grade in Brownsville, Texas.
Hello, I'm Maddie Carr. I teach third grade. I taught second grade last year in LA.
Hi, I'm Kristin Cullinan and I teach second grade in Detroit.
Hi, I am Korth. I teach third grade in Santa Ana, California.
Hello, my name is Terra Nelson and I teach second and third grade in San Antonio, Texas. So our objectives for this presentation are first, that teachers will be able to define self-regulated learning. You'll also see SRL as our abbreviation for self-regulated learning throughout this presentation. Our second objective is that teachers will be able to conceptualize the importance and implications of students' self-regulated learning development. Lastly, we hope that teachers will be able to implement the most effective approaches and practices for promoting self-regulated learning in their own classrooms.
So before we begin, I'm going to quickly run you through our agenda for this presentation. We are going to start with an overview of self-regulation. So we're going to talk about the definition, the importance, and the role of teachers. Next, we are going to talk about the best practices for teaching self-regulated learning. So we will discuss some instructional teaching strategies, classroom tasks and activities, and overall classroom characteristics. Next, we will go into implications, so how best practices for promoting self-regulated learning can be implemented in elementary, middle, and high school classrooms. And finally, we'll have questions with you guys tomorrow.
So the way that we'll progress through the first part of our presentation is that we'll discuss the definition of self-regulation, we'll talk about the importance, and then we'll talk about the role of the teacher in promoting self-regulation for our students. So before we dive into what self-regulation is, we should discuss what self-regulation isn't. So I want you to consider two contrasting examples. In the first, I want you to take a look at the left image, where in this scenario, students are completely focused on the teacher. They're being quiet, they're paying attention. The teacher is reading a story and she's stopping here and there to ask comprehension questions. Students raise their hand, they answer the question, and then they go back to being quiet. Everything seems to be in order. I want you to contrast this to an example of a classroom in which everyone is kind of doing their own thing. There's centers, some students are working on the computer, some are working on their reading strategies, some are in different centers, everybody kind of doing their own thing. There's a lot more noise going on, not everybody's quiet, but which of these two examples would be a self-regulated classroom? The actual classroom that's being more self-regulated is the second. Even though everybody's kind of being a lot more loud, doing their own thing, the reason why this is more self-regulated is because all children are fully engrossed in what they're doing. There's not a single child that's daydreaming or withdrawn, and all activities are being self-directed. In the compliance classroom, which was the first one that I described, there's several students that, though they seem to be paying attention, they're actually completely zoned out, and only a few students are actually engaged. So with this idea of compliance versus self-regulation, I want us to talk about what we will define as self-regulation. Self-regulation in our presentation is going to refer to the ability of a student to set goals for personal learning and then attempt to monitor, regulate, and control their attention, behavior, and emotions to meet those goals. There's going to be three main components for this that will be important for us as teachers, and that is flexible attention, working memory, and inhibitory control.
So why is all of this important, right? As teachers, why is it important for our students to be self-regulated? And the answer to that is that there are a lot of consequences, both positive or negative, associated with a child's ability to self-regulate. So for those with positive self-regulation skills, we tend to see that those students have greater academic motivation. They're also more engaged in their learning, and this leads to more overall school success, so better performance in school. Aside from learning, these children also have more positive social skills, so they're better able to get along with their peers, with their teachers, parents, and others. And also positive self-regulation skills is just generally associated with more healthy and adaptive development throughout childhood and onto adulthood. On the other hand, negative self-regulation skills are associated with less academic motivation. Students tend to be less engaged, and of course, therefore, they tend to have less success in school and perform a little bit less than their peers who are better self-regulated. These negative self-regulation skills are also associated with more conflict in relationships with peers, with teachers, and with parents. So poor self-regulation skills can lead to some negative social outcomes as well as academic ones. That being said, as teachers, it's really important for us to help our students to develop their abilities to self-regulate. So children will develop self-regulation skills, but it doesn't just happen inherently or naturally like they grow. A child's development of self-regulation is integrated with their environment, and a lot of aspects of self-regulation need to be explicitly and directly taught to them. So as a teacher, it is your role to explicitly teach your children some skills and strategies that they can use to self-direct their own learning. And this is so important that it really should be taught just like it were a content area course. So it's just as important to teach your students how to set goals and direct their learning towards meeting these goals as it is to teach them math skills.
So now I'm going to talk about some of the best practices for promoting self-regulated learning in the classroom. So first, we're going to start with instructional teaching strategies and then go into classroom tasks and activities, and then the overall classroom characteristics. So I'm going to start with some instructional teaching strategies. So self-regulation should be taught directly through explicit instruction and responsive feedback, and indirectly through modeling and scaffolding of students' own self-regulated learning application. So just like we teach procedures at the beginning of the school year, it is so important that we teach self-regulation skills to our students at the beginning of the school year through modeling and scaffolding of different activities. So our ultimate goal, like Kristin said, is for our students to develop these cognitive and motivational skills such as goal setting and time and resource management, and metacognitive skills such as self-evaluation and reflection and mindfulness. Okay, so I'm going to start by telling you about some of the cognitive and motivational SRL skills that we found in our research. So I'm going to start by explaining to you a little bit about goal setting. So goal setting is so important as it gives the students some learning goals that they can look forward to in their academic success. And so we have found SMART goals to be very beneficial as it teaches students how to create specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals. When students have goals that are specific and short-term, they're able to develop a better motivation to complete those goals, and teachers can help them achieve their goals through positive feedback and monitoring their progress. We can also teach students how to monitor their own progress through checklists. So since self-regulated learning goals and skills are really hard for students to develop, it's important that we as teachers teach and model those skills first, and then give students the opportunity to fulfill those skills on their own. So I would probably start with introducing checklists as a class, teaching students why they're important and how we should use them, and then giving students their own individual checklists to accompany them in achieving their specific goal. We can also teach students how to organize their belongings and other things in their life. And we could start by giving them color coding subject folders. So this helps them to keep things organized. And we can also teach them how to organize their desks through weekly desk cleanouts. Additionally, it is very important that students have time management strategies so that they can complete tasks on time and efficiently. One way that we found that was beneficial for students is using a timer. So teachers can put timers on the board or give students individual timers to help them complete their own tasks.
Okay, so now moving into classroom tasks and activities that provide students with opportunities to develop their metacognitive self-regulated learning skills. So again, we want our students to be able to self-evaluate and self-reflect, to monitor their progress, to feel self-efficacious about what they are doing and what they've accomplished, how they've grown. So in order for them to have those skills, they need to be given opportunities to do so themselves. Some of these could include journaling. So, allowing students journaling time after specific lessons or at the beginning of each day. Another is student-teacher conferences. So setting aside those intentional times where you can conference with students, have them share with you about how they're monitoring their own learning, how they're assessing themselves, and then in those times giving encouraging and constructive feedback to your students that allow them to continue developing their skills. Self-assessments, this could take a variety of different forms, depending on what the purpose really is, but whether it's having students self-assess on their effort, self-assess on their understanding, on their collaboration with other students, all of these different purposes can be served through self-assessments, but allowing students to become familiar and comfortable with doing so. And then finally, reading comprehension. So really making that an intentional part of all reading that students do or that you do as a class so that they can start becoming more, again, comfortable with reflecting on what they've read and not just doing it, but actually thinking about what they've taken away from it and what their thoughts were in reaction to that. And then mindfulness, this is another self-regulated learning skill we want our students to have. So again, providing these opportunities in the classroom where they can practice mindfulness and really learn to do this so that it's something that they can start implementing on their own initiative and independently. Some of these could be coloring pages or just allowing for artwork time. This could be paired with content, or it could just be, a general early finisher type of activity. Yoga and meditation. So that is 2 other activities for mindfulness promotion. And then finally, we included one example, the Stop, Breathe, and Think app. That's just one example of so many apps for promoting mindfulness in young learners and even all the way through high school and adolescence. So these apps are ones that they could use in the classroom on school devices, but also on their own iPads or Chromebooks if they have them, again, to continue reinforcing the skill of practicing mindfulness on their own initiative, especially. So finally, classroom characteristics. This gives us a broad view of in a self-regulated learning promoting environment, what does that look like in the classroom? So this ties together kind of everything we've already talked about, but literature really describes these classrooms as being child-centered as opposed to teacher-directed. So in child-centered classrooms, there's encouragement of peer interaction and collaboration. Students are given choices to make their learning more meaningful to them and also accessible to them through their different learning styles in ways that they feel most comfortable in the learning environment. And finally, recognizing all students as unique and valued individuals in the classroom. And not just making that a broad message that you share, but making sure that students are really internalizing that and being provided opportunities to be able to feel valued. Okay, so some examples of how we can create classrooms that are child-centered and overall promoting of self-regulated learning. That includes flexible seating options so that there are spaces students can choose to go to if they would like to during independent work or reading time. And then also another idea is collaborative desk grouping. So instead of having your desks kind of in uniform fashion, independent, having students work in paired tables, so pushing 4 desks together, rotating what 4 desks, students are at those desks throughout the year so that students are given multiple opportunities to work with different groups of people. but really just allowing for those greater, more natural opportunities that they'll be able to share their thinking and collaborate with one another, and more naturally build self-regulated learning skills. A second example is problem-based or project-based learning. So this is kind of an overall approach to any curriculum, so across subjects, but having students really direct and take responsibility for their learning. And this also allows for them to really put into practice all self-regulated learning skills we've talked about, like setting goals, monitoring, reflecting on their own learning, and also building sustained motivation for the duration of the learning task and project. And then finally, an example is also incorporating opportunities for guided play in your classroom. So these are times when children probably, children especially, but really any age, wouldn't even be aware that they're building self-regulated learning skills, but they are in these times. And so that is because these children have to deliberately inhibit behaviors that don't correspond with specific roles in their play. They have to really voluntarily follow the rules, and they have to plan their play, which allows them to achieve a maximum display of willpower. So all really important SRL skills that they will just be reinforcing without even knowing it. And these could be incorporated in a number of different ways, but morning meeting and brain breaks and so on.
Okay, so now we will talk about the implications for the classroom. So after we've reviewed the literature, these are just some ways that you can apply self-regulation teaching strategies in your classroom. Regardless if it is elementary, middle, or high school, these strategies would work for students of all ages. So during the beginning of the year, it's important to start off strong with instating these strategies into your classroom. So these are just a few examples of mini lessons that you can do to provide students with the opportunity to foster these self-regulated learning skills. So the first mini lesson or example that we have is how to set SMART goals. So once again, we want students to be able to set these measurable, reasonable goals in a timely manner, and we need to model how to do that for students. Next, you can introduce checklists into your classroom. Chunking information and using this as a strategy to follow completion of an assignment is really helpful for students and motivates them to successfully complete a task. Next, you can have a peer collaboration mini lesson where you teach students the skills or the language that they should use when working with peers and group work, or just when working with peers in general in the classroom. And finally, teaching students how to stay organized, whether that's bringing in different colored folders, teaching them where they should put materials. All of that is really helpful to learners as they begin to step into a new school year. Once again, modeling these strategies to students will allow them to develop their own self-regulated learning skills. And then continuing on throughout the year, it's important to constantly promote self-regulated learning and provide students with the opportunities to practice and transfer their previously acquired self-regulated learning strategies and skills. So you can do this through mindfulness activities such as journaling, meditation, yoga, any type of movement. While this may take a few minutes away from instructional time, you'll get that time back because students will be more motivated and more focused once they return back to the classroom. You can also implement lots of project-based learning in your classroom. This, again, is allowing them to practice these previously acquired self-regulated learning strategies. Community circles with metacognitive discussions work great for all age levels. Elementary students, high school students can all speak about their own learning and reflect on their thinking critically. And then finally, allowing students the opportunity for guided play or just more informal interactions will allow them to once again rehearse these self-regulated learning strategies.
Thank you so much for watching our presentation. We hope that you enjoyed and that you learned some strategies about how to promote self-regulated learning that you can implement in your classrooms next year. We hope that you will join us and bring your questions to our question and answer session, which will take place on Tuesday at 2 o'clock. We're session C in DeBartolo, room 129. Please reference our next slide for all of our citations.